gone. The thrill is gone away. The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone away. You know you've done me wrong, and you'll be sorry someday.
Okay, for those of you who may not be familiar with tonight's subject, we're talking about the Appalachian Trail. And the Appalachian Trail is a trail that's 2,100 miles long, a little more than that. And it takes about 6 months to hike the whole thing through. And it starts in Georgia and it ends in Maine. Or if you're southbound, starts in Maine and ends in Georgia. But that's what the trail is basically, factually. What it really is, what it means, is a whole lot of other things. I know growing up, I always had, if you hear the words Appalachian Trail, you get pictures of high, rounded mountain peaks and valleys, and it really would bring to mind images of the quintessential outdoor experience. And I know growing up, I also would put myself in those pictures, saying that, I'm going to hike that trail one day, I'm going to do that. And I know a lot of other people did that too. And but one day, about 17 years ago, my day to hike that trail came, and quit my job, which was not a big loss, and went down to Georgia and started hiking north. And a couple of things I really learned about the trail. The trail is it's just an incredibly dense experience. It's like living an entire lifetime in 6 months. So if you were to take an entire lifespan of 70, 80 years, whatever it is, scrunch it right down into 6 months. That's what it's like. All the experiences you might have in your lifetime, good ones, bad ones, wonderful, beautiful, terrible, horrible. They're all packed right in there, so dense you can't separate one from another. They're all connected. If you were to take all the emotions that you feel in one lifetime, pack all those in there. At the same time, all the weather you would experience in one lifetime, it's all in there too. There's rain, there's sun, there's snow. I had a hurricane hit while I was hiking, 8 inches of rain overnight. I've seen tornadoes on the trail, just any kind of weather you can imagine, it's out there, and you're going to hit it in 6 months. Picture a lifetime worth of dirty socks. All the dirty socks of a lifetime, scrunch that down to just 3 pairs of socks. That's all you get, they're in there. Picture the sweat of a lifetime. It's a lot of sweat, and it's all in there too. Picture all the body odor of one lifetime. Okay, there is no smell in this world like a thru hiker. It's just horrible. It's horrible. Because all the showers of one lifetime and all the laundry of one lifetime, you haven't got time for that. You only got 6 months to live. If somebody gave you 6 months to live, would you run out and do your laundry? No. So the trail is just, it's pretty incredible. And all the food of a lifetime. You get to eat like a horse. You just cannot keep up with the calories you're burning. It's very physically intense. So you can eat like a horse. Of course, you also smell like a horse because you've been sweating like a horse, but you get to eat. And you also lose weight. You can eat all you want, and you still lose weight. That's something Jenny Craig can't even promise you. But one thing also the trail is, it's a great metaphor for life. When you start hiking north, you're through hikers born. and you just live this incredibly intense life, and you get to Katahdin, and your through hike is over. It's dead. But the spirit of the trail and the soul of your through hike stays with you. And it stays with you for the rest of your life. And so with that, I'm going to introduce tonight's speaker. We're lucky to have Tom Mullin here on campus. He has boundless energy. And I like to think that part of that energy is the spirit of his hike inside of him. And he shares that with all of us. And tonight he's really going to share it with all of us. So without any further ado, here's Tom Mullin.
Thank you. I will use the microphone a little bit in a second, but if I could have somebody turn off the depressing part about the conversation tonight, and so I could turn on the picture here. Yes, if you don't mind, that'd be great. Otherwise, it's just going to read. So thank you very much for having me this evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share my story, my hike, and it's also my wife's hike because we did it as a team going from Georgia to Maine. But before we get too into it, I know most of you are familiar with the AT in some form or another, but I'll just do like the quick synopsis history of the Appalachian Trail. Depending on how you look at it, it either starts or ends in Maine or starts or ends in Georgia. The northern terminus is Mount Katahdin, and the original southern terminus was Mount Oglethorpe down in Georgia, about 20 miles from where Springer Mountain, the now southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. It actually was moved from the original time. The trail was created because of Mount Oglethorpe was becoming way too developed as far as houses and industry nearby, and they moved it to Springer Mountain. It all started with Benton McKay. He was an architect and a planner for the Forest Service. And he was a visionary, really what today we call the first community planner. And in 1921, in the American Association of Architects, he published an article about creating a footpath, a greenway from Georgia to Maine, stretching along the Appalachian chain with the idea that it would have communities connecting between the two places where people could get away from the busyness of the urban life and reconnect with nature and the outdoors. We're going to have to, if it's okay for the slide, yeah, thanks, I greatly appreciate it. Then that formulated an idea that the Appalachian Trail Conference was formed in 1939. After a lot of fits and starts of the idea of creating this footpath, envisioning it to be 1,000, 2,000 miles long. And in 1931, the ATC was formed, and in 1937, after a great deal of hard work by hundreds and thousands of volunteers, the Appalachian Trail was completed in its entirety, a footpath connecting from Georgia to Maine. But it really wasn't the trail that we know today. It was more of a connection of lots of different trails that were in existence, some road walks, some old logging roads that connected this pathway. It wasn't the 2-foot wide blazed trail that we know today. But it was connected. There were several other interesting highlights throughout the years. It was the years of construction and maintenance, the years of decline actually during World War II. It fell into a great deal of disrepair because all the guys were out overseas in the Pacific and European theater. Thanks. And the other point was that when they all came back, the ATC reformulated, had new plans with the idea of creating and moving forward on the protection of the trail. 1948, they had their annual meeting down in North Carolina. And at that conference, Myron Avery, the president of the Appalachian Trail Conference at the time, was leading a discussion about how unlikely it was for anybody to, and nor should they even plan for, people hiking the trail from beginning to end, all in one season, in one full swoop. And then Will Schaefer wrote the ATC saying, hey, I just finished the Appalachian Trail, wonderful trip. It took me 4 months, and here's my journal, prove I did what you asked, but what I did this past summer for my vacation. He was reconnecting after coming back from World War II. So that opened up an old door that there was not just uses for day use, and perhaps some long hiking, but that somebody might actually want to hike continuously from beginning to end. 1968, the National Trails Act, which created and established these long hikes, long trails, and put them under the authority of the National Park Service. 1984, not that long ago actually, the Appalachian Trail's management moved from being a federal, state, and local management. There was no overseer for the Appalachian Trail of operating it to the Appalachian Trail Conference. They signed a memorandum of agreement. We'll be doing this, we'll do this, and it turned out this is actually a landmark. It was the first time that a national trail system had been turned over to a non-profit organization to operate and manage. And then 1987 was the 50th anniversary of the Appalachian Trail with lots of celebrations. So with that in mind, I do have, I hiked it in 1987. My wife and I, can you all hear me in the back? My wife and I I had always thought about doing the trail as a young man. My father and mother took me on lots of backpacking trips, camping trips, and saw a lot of America. And I knew the trail from high school days, from an explorer post, and did a lot of hiking on it. Nothing lengthy. Then I had a friend in high school, James Wells, and Pat Burns, and Nancy Johnson. 3 of them graduated from high school early in January to hike the Appalachian Trail, through hiking. They were inspired to do it. And Jim Wells and Pat Burns were 2 of my best buddies. And they got as far as the Great Smoky Mountains, and they got snowed in. About 3 feet of snow fell in a period of about 2 days, and they were stuck in a shelter in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park for about a week. And it was just that was their stretch breaking point. And they decided to get off the trail, and they didn't through hike the trail. They didn't finish their hike. But they had a great time with wonderful stories. Then I graduated from college. I got a job working at a nature center, having a great time working with young kids and families in an interpretive nature center setting. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, so if I intermix that title, just forgive me on that one. She and I went to Mount Katahdin and Baxter State Park in 1985 for a fall vacation. And we camped at Katahdin Stream Campground and said, okay, let's climb the mountain tomorrow morning. We got up at 6:30 on the trail by 7, and it was the hardest friggin' hike I've ever been on. We got back to the car at 7 o'clock at night in the dark after hiking continuously up the hill and back, and spending only about a half hour, 45 minutes on top of Baxter Peak. And we were exhausted, but we had to get in the car because we had a whale watch to go to over Acadia National Park the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. But it was a really inspiring hike. It was a Class 1 day, which you could see from hundreds of miles. We pictured it on mine, we could almost see the Atlantic Ocean from the top. So we're all hiking then back at Acadia after the whale watch, which was a great time. We're on one of the carriage paths over by Jordan Pond House, Jordan Pond, and my wife says, as we're walking along, she says, so how'd you like that hike over at Baxter State Park? And I said, oh, that was great, I had a really good time. She says, yeah, well, I've decided next year I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail through hiking. I said, oh yeah, that sounds great. Says, and if you want to come along, great, but if not, I'm going. I said, oh, okay. So I had this discussion which led to a debate, heated debate and discussion. There was a period of about 30 minutes where nothing was said. And then finally I said, how about if we do it next year, in 1987? That'll give us time to get prepped and ready. I can finish up my graduate work and have enough years at the Nature Center, blah, blah, blah. And she said, okay, that sounds like it's a good deal, but if you don't go, that's okay, I'm still going. Okay, and I thought, oh, she'll change her mind before then. She didn't. So it did give us a lot of time, though. We let people know beforehand for big Christmas holidays, hey, we might need a tent, we might need this. So that sort of built up the equipment repertoire. And in 1987, just like Jack did, we quit our jobs. She was a nurse, I was a naturalist at a nature center. Worked at the park authority for 5 years, and everybody was like, wow, you're quitting your job. You know, with no job expectations at the end. Just like, oh, I'll figure it out when I do it. March 29th, we got on the trail down in future in-laws. They drove us down, dropped us off at the bottom of trail. The trail, actually, you know, the Appalachian Trail doesn't start at the bottom of the hill; it starts at the top of Spring Mountain. So you have to hike up to the top of Spring Mountain to start your hike. 7 miles.
It was 9 when I did it. Yeah. They didn't make it the first day.
Yeah, it's a hike just to start the hike. So we started March 29th, 1987. It was a great time, a wonderful adventure, and I wouldn't regret it. And so when we finished it on October 7th, 190 days later, people have asked us, you know, what was it like? And what was your favorite place? And what was your favorite location on your hike? And I said, I can't pinpoint one particular thing that was the best, because it was a whole combination of things, just like Jack mentioned in the introduction about cramming a whole life in 6 months, in our case, 7.5 months. And it was lots and lots of great parts and some tough parts, some scary parts. But I did it with working with some friends, with some pictures I took, and borrowed some slides from folks. I have a slideshow I'd like to share with you about a typical day in the life of an Appalachian Trail through hiker. And it's not that long, but it does give you a good snapshot of what a typical day might be. Is there any way I can get the lights turned down? No, that's okay. Thanks. So the Appalachian Trails. Ours was a northbound journey, starting at Springer Mountain and heading to Maine. Most mornings, we tried our best to have a view, our campsite or stay in the shelter, and morning approached. Thank you very much, John. But morning did come no matter what. And essentially, we're hiking from sunrise to sunset. So in March, it was a little bit later and ended a little bit early in the day. And in September, October. But in the summertime, we would wake with dawn and hike until dawn, so the days could be quite long. And every day, I thought of where I started and where I was headed. But you can't think in that terms every day. You have to set smaller goals, like where am I going to stop for lunch? Where am I going to go for stop for the evening? The sounds of water nearby from the shelter of the campsite. The rush of streams. And you thought about, even before you got out of bed, because you've actually looked up in the guidebook in advance, what my day might entail for that day. It might be crossing over some barbed wire or fences on a nearby farm. It might be, well, you know what? Walking across some pretty rocky trail. It's not just an easy footpath for the feet. Crossing over some streams, maybe take your boots off in some low water, or some deeper water. Hey, you know what? You do cross a lot of bridges. 1987 was the last year they charged people 10 cents to cross the Bear Mountain Bridge across the Hudson River. It's now free for hikers. There were, at that time, in the year that we did it, quite a few roadwalks. Just crossing over between mountain peaks. There's far fewer now, actually. And we knew in advance where some of the hard hikes were. Anybody recognize this one? Right here in Maine, it's Nahoosic Arm. The trails were at times pretty wet. Here in Maine, our hike was 17 out of 19 days it rained. We saw lots of wildlife as we went along. Deer. Oops, yeah. Quite a few skunks. Sometimes they were closer than we anticipated. Anybody see it?
Yes.
We saw 7 different rattlesnakes, 7 individual rattlesnakes along the trail. Farther south we saw them in North Carolina, and farthest north was Massachusetts. Some things were attracted to the really stinkiest things, actually. Nothing worse than smelly socks. The trail on a typical hike could be divided into things that you saw on the ground as you looked down. The small things jumped out at you as you walked along. But then eventually things became more on an eye level. The cracks and the rocks and the plants coming out of them. The rhododendron at eye level. Hiking in North Carolina during the rhododendron season with the Catawba rhododendron. And you would hike through fields of rhododendron for 2 or 3 miles, walking through blooming rhododendron. Eye level plants growing from the ground. And of course, the view looking down. Fontana Dam down on the just south of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Besides being a hydroelectric power plant for the Tennessee Valley Authority, it also was one of the few spots in the trail where there are free hot showers. Very important. The valleys of the Shenandoah and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And of course, the whites in the above timberline. Knife's edge. But you know what? All the scenery in the world was great, but as you're hiking along, you thought of other basic necessities, like water. Pretty critical. And sometimes it was not easy to find. And sometimes the water I drank was pretty nasty looking. I had to boil it for minutes, tens of minutes. There was this one in particular that I remember distinctly down in Brushy Mountain ridges in southwest Virginia that we never drank it, but we boiled it for eating, making macaroni, boiled macaroni, and it was so nasty it had this brown scum on top of the water. It was scum, brushed off the brown scum to put the macaroni in. Boiled it for about 15 minutes. So you were always on the lookout for spring because pretty much you carried your own water and you needed to drink on a regular basis. But sometimes it rained way too much and you had to dry yourself out. You thought of food. Hey, if you were here a little bit early, I had a video going on about Through Hikers Got North to Katahdin video. And you pretty much thought about food a lot. On average, the person burns about 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day while you're on your through hike. So it is almost virtually impossible for you to maintain your weight, let alone gain weight. Oops. Hey, if there was a restaurant nearby the trail, you'd go off the trail to go to the restaurant. The most memorable one I had was right here in Maine, actually. At a camp
fishing camp where they had a AT2 hiker's breakfast. It was 13 pancakes, 5 sausages, all the coffee you could drink, juice. I think there might have been some eggs tossed in there too. And then you could go back for seconds for the pancakes. And routinely, people did. You started looking at the animals along the trail in different ways. Like, well, maybe that was that steak I was thinking. Pretty much you became pigs. And you'd eat almost anything. Hey, what did you do on the trail if you had a chance? Hey, stop and call home. Let the folks know, your friends and family back home, that you are okay. You might stop for a break, eat a half gallon of ice cream, no problem. You might take advantage of a couch that might have been dumped alongside the trail to rest and relax. You met all sorts of friends along the trail, sometimes human, sometimes animal. People adopted trail dogs quite frequently. They may not have stayed with you, but you adopted them for a while. And you discussed where you would go that day and where you'd stop that night. Naps on sunny rocks and ledges. A common, everyday, common experience that you wish for. But the end of the day is coming. You see the shelter where you're staying that night just up ahead. You step down into the area, the communal area. The first thing you think about is setting up your tent, or if you're staying in the shelter, getting your bedroll. But really the first thing, sometimes the shelters were better than others as well. You took advantage of what was there. But the first thing you thought about when you got into camp was, hey, let's make dinner. And food really, after a while, at least with my hike, it came down to 2 varieties of food. Yellow and red. And you typically ate a little bit too fast and may have had a little bit of an indigestion as well. After dinner, you might play cards with friends that you might have met on other 2 hikers or hikers on the trail. Or perhaps read books that you might have picked up or carried with you along the way. Write letters, or even more importantly, write down the thoughts in the journal that you kept with you. The day is setting. Sun's coming down. You're winding down for the day. Next morning, you get up and do it all over again. So, if somebody could turn the lights up just a little bit, that'd be great. So my through hike, it lasted 190 days. We didn't plan for it that way. We didn't have a time deadline for our hike. It's pretty much as we had, since we didn't have jobs to go back to, we figured we'd take as long as we could. Except we did have a deadline of October 15th to make sure that we climbed up to Mount Katahdin, because they close the peak for climbing after October 15th because of weather issues. So if we weren't going to make that deadline, we were going to somehow get up to Baxter, hike it and hike back down, and sort of flip-flop and come back down and finish our hike. Because we did know that we wanted to through-hike the trail in one continuous hike. Didn't want to do it and chop it up into a couple different routes if we could avoid it. So over the years, I've actually had, I'm going to have some individual questions now from the audience, but I do have some. I've done a number of presentations, and I actually planned on thinking about this, doing talks when I was on the hike. So I actually have the answers to some of the 4 most frequently asked questions that people have. How long was your hike? Ours was, and everybody's is different. And in fact, Jack and I would agree on this one. Everybody's hike is different, and everybody's hike is their own. So not one is better than the other. But ours was 190 days, which meant it averaged out to about 11.5 miles per day. The longest day we ever did was 26 miles. And the shortest was 3 miles. that was a really crummy day, so we stopped at 3 miles and camped out instead. Yes?
Did you wear the same pair of shoes?
I did not wear the same pair of shoes, actually. And this past summer, I just threw away my shoes that I had saved from the hike. They were so nasty that and my wife said, oh, they gotta go. I mean, they really were wretched. But I went through 2 pairs of boots and 1 pair of tennis shoes. So, and my wife went through 3 pairs of hiking boots. So, but we wore lightweight boots. We didn't wear heavy-duty boots. It was pretty much lightweight hiking boots. We didn't. And also the other question one question people was, oh, how are your blisters? And my wife had 1 and I had none the entire hike. So it depends on individuals. Hey, how much did your pack weigh? Great question. And my first response was, going into town or coming out of town? Because going into town meant that I'd eaten everything and it was lighter. So going out of town, my pack weighed anywhere between 50 and 60 pounds. And my wife's weighed anywhere between 45 and 50 going out. Going into town, mine might weigh about 45 to 50, maybe 50 pounds, and hers would weigh about 40 pounds. How much weight did you lose? Well, as you can tell, I have a real weight problem. So I bulked up before the hike to 135 pounds. And that's the most I've weighed ever. And so I really, I just ate a lot, and I exercised and stuff like that, but I was pretty much, lost a lot of weight. And I bulked up, and I lost a total of 11, 12 pounds. So I dropped down to about 123, 124 pounds. My wife never told me what her start weight was or end weight was. But she, by the end of her hike, we both were in probably the best shape we've ever been in our entire lives. And I could walk forever with, and my shoulders, because of the backpack. This is actually the backpack that I used, actually. I did save that one because we still use it to store rope in our garage. But the fact of the matter was that we were in great shape and slim and really sinewy, you might say. My wife was very svelte, you might say, after doing the hike. But what happened to her with her weight? Anybody know? Anybody take a guess? No. No, but that does happen. No, actually, she gained muscle. All the fat that she had gained muscle. She came back weighing 1 more pound than she started. She was, she looked great and she looked slim, but at the same time, she actually weighed more than she left. She was a little disappointed. Because I don't know what the beginning and end weight was. She just never mentioned it to me. And what did you all argue about? Now, this is the one point that's interesting. When we started our hike, there were, that year in '87, they estimated about 1,000 people started off through hiking the trail. And at the end of it, there were registered that year about 105 people who registered as completed their through hike. Of that, there were about, I'm pretty sure it was like 4, maybe 5 couples that finished it. But there were a lot more couples who started the hike. Lots. And they didn't finish. Not necessarily because they physically ran out, although that might have been it, but just sometimes the hike wasn't what the couples or any individuals. About 10% of the people who start the trail finish the trail in that season. So one time somebody asked me, what did you argue about with your now wife, but at the time, what did you argue about with your girlfriend on your hike? And I said, let me think about what was the most common thing. And of course somebody in the audience said, sex. And I said, no. Now, it wasn't the argument. In fact, at some point in time in the hike, you're just tired. And you're thinking, that doesn't even come across the radar. So what do you think the thing that we argue about most of all was? No, it wasn't food, because pretty much we would eat anything. We would eat, eventually we got to the point where we would eat, boil up a big pile of macaroni, take squeezed parquet, salt and pepper, and that was good. Because it was easy to clean up, and it was, like a lot of starch. But no, what did we argue about?
Where to stop.
Where to stop. Where to end at the end of the day. We argued 3 times about it. I lost every single time. And in fact, I should have known after the first time that I was going to lose the argument every single time. Because you hike to the ability that the person that you're picking with. So it only happened 3 times. It could have happened a lot more. But one thing, we did have one rule as a couple, and this might have been sort of why we finished the compromise. We didn't actually hike as a couple. We camped at night as a couple, but in reality, we walked our own pace. So she had a slower pace than I did. So I agreed that I would stop at the top of every mountain and at the bottom of every hill, and for sure at all road crossings. So cross over together. And so I'd get up to the top of the peak or the mountain or the hill, and I'd wait for her, and she'd come up, and we'd take a break together at that point. And then I'd start off on my hike and go down the hill, and she'd catch up with me eventually. And of course, at all road crossings, safety breaks, just in case somebody would be driving by. It was not just because she was a female, but anybody crossing the road, it's always nice to cross with somebody else so you have a safety person. Now, I have a part 2 for the presentation today, but I did want to ask this question before I moved on. How many of you in this audience have ever hiked on the Appalachian Trail? And great. How many of you have through hiked the trail? Jack? Is there anybody else? How many of you are planning to through hike the trail? Well, there's some great resources about how to through hike the trail and look up in advance. And I have a handout, Chris also has it, I'll pass out in the second part of your class. But I would also recommend, if nothing else, the year that you through hike the trail, that you join the Appalachian Trail Conference. So I think students or individuals are only like $25, $30. But to be a member for the organization that maintains the trail and is responsible for the management is a really good commitment for the trail. Now, thinking about, back on it, we planned this trail started in '85, and then coincidentally, once we got to it, in February of 1987, National Geographic published the 50th anniversary edition, 50th anniversary celebration article about the Appalachian Trail. I didn't even know it was the 50th anniversary. So all of a sudden, that year that we did it, there were parties going all up and down the Appalachian Trail. One in Damascus, and one in Pennsylvania, and Concord, New Hampshire. There was a big party for all hikers, but through hikers in particular. And I'll end up this part of my through hike on a kind of a funny story. We'll part 2 on the slideshow about the trail today. We got up to Maine, and we came up to this photographer, Sam Abel, and worked for National Geographic. And in fact, this book right here, Mountain Adventure, they were republishing their book on the Appalachian Trail. Got to the bridge, and he was like standing at this edge of this creek, and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm Sam Abel. I work for the National Geographic, and we're redoing this book, and we were wondering if we could take some pictures of my wife, because they're not at that time. There were not that many female through hikers. There's far more now, but there just weren't that many back then. Probably of the 100 that finished, was maybe 10, 12 that year. So it was a really small number. So the big part about this one thing, the Appalachian Trail, went across, not the regular street crossing, but you could, as an alternative, cross over on this wire. Jack, was that there when you did it?
The cable.
Yeah, the cables, yeah. A single cable cross, and you held on to it, your hands up here, and your feet down here, and balance yourself, and you cross across the creek like that. And Sam really wanted to take a picture of my wife with her backpack. Oh, I like this, across the creek. And so he did it. It took about a half hour, the shots, and do the whole thing. And he gave us some goat cheese and crackers, which we ate. Well, we walked, and I took our friend stay in bed, Jed, and his dog Roger, another hiker, through hiker. He had picked up a dog along the way, and so I took, Jed did it also, and I walked the dog across the creek, just to get across. So at the end of it, we said, "Oh, Sam, when you get a chance, at the end, can you send us some information how we can buy the book?" When it comes out in the fall, he said, "Oh no, I'll send you a copy free. Anybody who's pictures or stuff like that we talked to, we send a complimentary copy." So great, it's wonderful. So came home, got the book in the mail that day and said, oh great, our picture's in it. So we flipped through it, and it's me. They didn't have any pictures of my wife and me. They left all those out. So there I am crossing the dog garage. I guess I was more attractive than the through hiking woman and kid. So that was a little disappointing on my wife's part. So if we could now, let's see.
Ron, did you have a trail name?
Well,
That's a good question.
Lots and lots of people have trail names, like Stay in Bed Jed or Sunshine, and we were a couple, so we had a really interesting, unique trail name. Tom and Terry. That's just how we signed ourselves and registers and identified ourselves. We were also one of the slowest people on the trail. Since we started March 29th and taken the time, we met virtually everybody on the trail that year because so many people, not too many people started before us, and they passed us. So after us. There weren't that many people that we didn't see. So if, let me turn off the slide projector, and then if we can get the PowerPoint on, that'd be great. While we're waiting for this, are there any other questions? Yes, Derek.
All right, so like I was noticing that it crosses the Connecticut River someplace. I was wondering if you could just tell me exactly where, how does it?
The Connecticut River crosses over who's it, Tom? I think that's.
I mean, when it goes between Vermont and New Hampshire.
Vermont. Pardon me? Yeah. Oh yeah, right. Okay, that one. Right. Yeah, Hanover, New
Oh,
Hampshire.
Hanover.
Right.
Okay. All right, so not Corning. Okay. I was just wondering if it went across the covered bridge. I was curious.
No, I don't think, I don't know, like.
At least the year that we did it, it was 2,139.5 miles. It's changed. I think it's up to around 2,166 miles. It changes every year because of reroutes and relocations. Okay. Appalachian Trail. Lasting impressions on me. Hey, when I finished the hike in the years since then, I've definitely thought that one does not need all the stuff that one accumulates. We lived for 6 months with all that we had on our backpacks. And it was pretty much self-sufficiency. I mean, not completely, but we could live with little stuff on the outside. And I came away with a far deeper awareness of the poverty in southern Appalachia. I knew it before. I grew up in the South. But having been down there and along the corridor of the Appalachian Trail, poverty was overwhelming. Not that it's good in Maine, but it was significant. Maintaining the trail is a whole lot of work, in my opinion. The volunteer is way higher after hiking the trail from beginning to end than it was before. And I thought it was pretty good before. But hey, it's a lot of work. And going through some really rugged, remote areas. And then when you calculate into the fact that the average age of most of these volunteers who are maintaining the Appalachian Trail is over 60 years old, not like 25, 30 years. Most of the volunteers who volunteer for the maintaining clubs are retired people, not people working full-time. Open spaces, whether wilderness or just developed, or just not developed, are precious, but real wilderness is something really to protect because it's special and unique, and we'll talk about that just a second. And I've never been as better, I'm in fairly good condition now, but I've never been in as good physical condition after hiking the trail ever since. So it wasn't a wilderness experience. Sort of. I was on the trail for 190 days. 2 of them, I can count up no signs of human impact or experiences. That's it. Once in Georgia and once in Maine. And that means that not just people, but like sounds of logging trucks or any human man-made type of experience. So I would say that was sort of a wilderness experience. Some days it was like a highway. We happened to cross over in the White Mountains and the parts of the presidential on Labor Day weekend. I'd say, and it was a beautiful day. One of the days was gorgeous, like a class 1 type of day. I would say that we ran into somebody on the trail every 15 to 20 times. It was pretty steady. Rarely, even in April, did we have a shelter or a campground to ourselves. Looking back on it, I'm pretty sure that where we camped or where any shelter, there was always somebody there. It was pretty rare that, if at all. Some of the peaks, there was pretty much always somebody was at the top. Not necessarily piles of people, but even at Baxter, on the day that we finished, there were about 50 people. Not all through Hiker Station, just people out there. And it's way busier than that. So what has changed in the 20 years since I did in 1987? Well, plus and minus. Visitor use of the trail. The really positive part about this is that, hey, more people are experiencing it. The Appalachian Trail in 1980 was estimated to have 2 to 3 million people utilizing the trail a year. And now it's estimated to be 4 to 5 million visitor contacts per year. So that's the positive. The negative, of course, is that means there's a whole lot more usage of the trail. Wear and tear, repair and maintenance is definitely higher. Encroachments of nearby development. Well, when we hiked it, there were actually lots of parts where there were roadblocks, or quite literally walking highways in the Cumberland Valley of Pennsylvania. We had a 20-mile roadblock that went by people's houses. That's all been rerouted now to be more of a wildland type of experience. That also meant that we didn't get free food as we walked along, and hoses out there, and one lady was known as the ice cream lady who gave out ice cream cones with 2 hikers. But nearby encroachments and nearby development have definitely become an issue these days. Land acquisition to protect it. Hey, the trail now is virtually protected from Georgia to Maine. There's a corridor from all the way, with very little bit of it now not protected under federal law as part of the National Scenic Trails Act. But that doesn't mean that that's the real positive. But there's all sorts of encroachments and development nearby that are impinging on the viewscapes and the experience of the people walking. Air pollution. Hey, it was a problem in '87, but nowadays the number of clear days down south in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah Valley, the Blue Ridge Valley, Blue Ridge Mountains, and the views are now lower. There's far fewer completely visible days where you can't see the valley because of the haze caused by air pollution issues. Safety. Okay. In reality, it's one of the safest places to be in the world, statistically. But since 1970, there have been 9 murders on the Appalachian Trail. One of them was an alumni of Unity College, of course, as many of us know. And there have been, some of them have been solved, and some of them haven't been solved. But the reality is, safety is it's a really safe experience. But the perception, whenever that pops up, it's all over the news, is the Appalachian Trail. The really big plus I wanted to mention was that equipment element of things. Sorry about that. Okay. We'll get back right to it. And for 20 years that I did the hike, the equipment has dramatically changed. My backpack right now, Jack and I were discussing it before the talk tonight. My backpack now would not weigh 50 to 60 pounds. It would weigh anywhere between 30 and 40 pounds, maybe. The lightweightness of equipment has dramatically made the experience far more enjoyable for people hiking the trail. And quite frankly, when I did the trail, this was the standard backpack that people have. There was an external frame, the backpack was attached to it, you put your stuff on the outside. There was just then beginning to be the internal frames for backpacks. And through hikers on the trail. The plus part, hey, lots of people are experiencing the opportunity to do through hiking. the negative is it can be pretty busy, especially down south at the beginning of the spring hiking season. The year that we did it, approximately 1,000 people. Now it's averaging between 3,000 and 4,000 people a year. They've had some peak years over 4,000 people. And the other plus point is hiking facilities. It's much easier if you have problems or issues to get off the trail or even facilities right on the trail for overnight accommodation. And the impact of web and print media. The Appalachian Trail is being marketed. You go to most communities now along the trail, and it is a key element for the visitor experience for those trails. But there was one, I just want to point out the impact of the printed material on how usage in any sort of national facility might take place. Does anybody know the name of the book that shot up attendance through hiking? A Walk in the Woods with Bill Bryson. That book, when he published it, and it's a wicked funny book too. It's worth reading or listening to on book on tape. But the fact of the matter is, after he did it, the number of through hikers went up about 300% that year. And so it's increased since then because of that printed book and the stories that he told. Ironically, of course, if you've never read it, he doesn't through hike the trail. He just tells the story of hiking. Well, so what are some of the current issues facing the trail right now? Hey, I'm all for wind farms, but if you're through a Appalachian Trail board of directors member or a through hiker, some people have a great deal of concerns regarding the viewscapes and views from the Appalachian Trail of wind farms. The idea of having seen one wind turbine, two things, but 70 might be another whole issue. Air quality, of course, accessibility on the Appalachian Trail. With the advent of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, new facilities, new buildings come into compliance with the ADA Act. Interstate development, not so much in Maine. Of course, we don't have any interstates for the most part. But farther down south, in North Carolina and Virginia, interstates are and interchange, and not just the views, but actually crossing over the trail are becoming an issue. Funding for maintenance and protection, and competing volunteer programs and issues with liability. Nowadays, if you're a volunteer for the Appalachian Trail Conference, you cannot operate a chainsaw unless you've gone through the certification program. That's one example. What can you do to help? And then this is on part of the handout. Don't just hike the trail, help maintain it. The Appalachian Trail Organization is one organization, and all their member organizations have trail maintenance programs. Or you can advocate for all sorts of ideas for education. Local aid, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the AMC. The first one is whiteblaze.net. It's a website organization for people who are trail enthusiasts. And the one that I'm still a member of, actually, is the Appalachian Long Distance Hikers Association. And they meet once a year in October on Columbus Day weekend. Sometimes in the New England, Hanover area. Sometimes it's down in Gettysburg, central Pennsylvania, and other times it's down in West Virginia. And they have an annual meeting for people who want to through hike, or not just the AT, but also the Continental Divide, Pacific Crest Trail, and other long distance hiking experiences. So I hope you learned a little bit about the AT today. And those of you who are planning to do your hike, you're welcome to ask me anytime you like, any questions. At this point, I'd like to quickly, I know you've got to move to your next part, and I'm running a little bit, sorry about that, Chris. But if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for having me.
So we can entertain a few
Any other questions? Yes.
How much did it cost?
That's a great question, actually. And the year that we did it, the cheapest anybody I saw, we heard anybody do it, was $900. But we figured that we spent, we didn't keep real close track of it because we didn't want to. But we figured it, between the two of us, it was about $3,500, $4,000. But we, when we wanted to eat out, we ate out. We weren't trying to scrimp on that kind of thing. And somebody once asked me, geez, I don't think I can hike the trail. I'm not physically fit enough to hike the trail. And the fact of the matter is, and I can say this with all sincerity because I've seen All sorts of people hike the trail before. Nobody in this room could not hike the trail. Everybody can hike the trail in this way. Because after 30 days, pretty much everybody's in the same shape. If you've gotten through the first 30 days, you could pretty much finish to the very end. Now, what the real challenge is of course, the way I calculated out in my mind is 5% of the hike was financial. You had to have some money. We also paid for health insurance while we were gone. We bought out little health insurance plans, paid up our health insurance, so if we got hurt or injured, we could actually feel okay with going to the doctors. And that was real important for us, for me in particular, because I got Giardia when I was on the trail. Have any of you ever had Giardia before? You know what I'm talking about. And I got it 3 days out of town in Vermont. And I tell you, I think I knew every tree, every 20 feet before I got to that town, pretty well. But anyway, I was able to go to the doctors in Vermont and get the medication. 5% financial, 5% physical, and 90% mental. It was a mental challenge. And you think, oh, I'm going to go hiking for 6 months, and that sounds great, and it is, but to know that you're going to get up every morning and go for 14, 15, 16 miles, that day that we did the 26-mile hike, that was actually a little ironic. We stayed at one shelter. It was down in Virginia, just outside Virginia, Blacksburg, Virginia. We got there, and the idea was we were going to get to the crossover of the trail at this one point and go to the store that was only a half a mile away and buy all this food and come back to the trail, go up about half a mile and camp for the night and have like, you know, chili and hot dogs, all the stuff that you wouldn't want to carry for very long. Eat up that way, and we got to that road crossing after about 20 miles. Long, really long day for us. We hitchhiked, walked up to the trail, and it had burned to the ground 2 days before. I mean, still like smoldering. Oh, what are we going to do now? We don't have any food. This is depressing. So we actually ended up hiking another 6 miles to this quasi-hostel shelter by a gentleman. We stayed there. They had sodas and juices in their barn. You stayed in the barn. You had breakfast next morning for $3. Mostly, I think they wanted to talk to people. So it turned out pretty good. But we ended up 26 miles instead of 20 miles. That was a long day. Any other questions? Yes, John.
What was your favorite town?
Favorite town? I actually had several favorite towns. There were two down south that I really liked. One was, and you and I have chatted about it before, but Hot Springs, North Carolina was a great town. It was really just a real friendly trail town. But I have to admit, another really favorite one was, and I don't like it now, but at the time I really liked it. It was Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Now, if you've ever been there, it's a gateway community for the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and it's just a giant tourist trap. I mean, that's essentially what it is. If you look up in the book for poor development outside national parks, Gatlinburg is a perfect example. But it did have lots of restaurants. That was okay. First thing we ate was a double order of Long John Silver's chicken chops. And but there was, as we moved along, there were several other places, but those two really stuck out in my mind. Was something else?
Okay, you stayed at trail shelters most of the time, or you took your own
We
tent?
bought our own tent, and that was good because we did stay in shelters from time to time, a lot of times actually, but sometimes the shelters were pretty crowded.
Yeah.
So we actually didn't stay in them, or to be honest, some shelters were pretty hard. You know, like in Maine, when we did it the year we did it, a lot of Maine shelters were not just flat boards; they were these logs. So they were actually like trees.
So you took your tent wanted to stay
Yeah, I would say, yeah. And also, we had a tent that had a screen, so when it was buggy, we didn't have to do anything else.
This is going to be our last.
Okay, sure.
The most interesting person you met on the trail?
Most interesting person, besides stay in bed Jed and his dog Roger, it would have to be the French stooge, Luc Arsenault from Canada. And he had actually tried to hike the trail, 2 years before, and had a a family emergency and back home. But Luke Arsenault he was a much faster hiker from us, but he would take days off, and so we actually traveled off and on with him for about a month. Not because we were keeping up with him, but because he kept jumping off to do things and coming back, and we'd walk him for a while. He was great. And the other two guys were Tim and Larry. And they were really kind of crazy guys in Massachusetts. One quick story. Tim won a contest for eating wild garlic. It was down ramps, they're called, down in Southwest Virginia. And we met up with him and said, "Oh yeah, I won. I was at the White Mountain Ramp Festival, and I came in." He didn't win it. He came in second place for the ramp eating contest. That's great, Tim. Well, how many did you eat? Oh, well, you can't eat. It's like, how many can you eat within 3 minutes? And said, "Oh, well, how many did you eat?" 39. Wow, that's great. And he says, "Yeah, it was, and they gave me this trophy thing." Now, he and Tim had shared one. He and Larry shared one tent. So we're walking along, do you know what? They're a wild garlic type of thing. And the next couple days, it's kind of hot. You sweat. The ramp exuded from his body for the next 3 days. And that short 3-mile day I talked about was raining. Didn't want to hike too far. One of those days, we camped actually with Larry and Tim in the same general area. It was pouring rain. They were in the same tent. And Larry was saying, "Oh my God, Tim, open the vent." So, and thank you very much. And I know you have things that you have to do with this thing. I brought some materials to take a look at, including the photo journal from our hike.